My daughter Sarah brought me chamomile tea every evening. She'd dim the lights, play soft piano music, and tell me how much she loved me. But last Tuesday night, I found the papers she'd hidden in my own kitchen drawer. It wasn't the tea that caught me off guard. It was how carefully everything else was arranged. The music, the lighting, even her voice, all felt like they belonged in a movie about comfort and devotion. I remember thinking, how lucky am I to have a daughter who takes care of me like this? But as I bent down to get my reading glasses and accidentally knocked over that drawer, everything changed. There it was, a folder I hadn't seen before. Inside, legal documents, complex ones. Pages and pages about power of attorney, nursing home arrangements, and a transfer of my assets. Every line typed, but one note in handwriting I knew by heart. 1.5 moros minus taxes, 1.1 moros clear. I sat in my kitchen, clutching papers that spelled out my own quiet removal from the life I built. Sarah's voice floated from the next room, humming, cheerful. She didn't know the weight I held in my hands. She still smiles at me every morning, not knowing I changed everything while she slept. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me tell you how my own daughter almost stole my entire life. After Robert passed, the silence in the house was unbearable. 30 years of shared routine suddenly unraveled. His side of the bed untouched, his coffee mug still in the cabinet, his favorite chair by the window collecting dust. The grief wasn't loud. It was quiet, steady, like the slow drip of a faucet at night. I wasn't just mourning a husband. I was mourning the life we built. The comfort of knowing someone always had your back. That's when Sarah came home. She called it just until I get back on my feet. Her marriage had ended, and she was juggling work, bills, and raising Emma, my bright-eyed, curious little granddaughter who lit up the hallway with every giggle. I welcomed them both with open arms. I thought maybe this was life's way of giving us all a second chance. A new chapter. Maybe we could all start over. The house came alive again. Emma's drawings on the fridge, Sarah cooking dinner and suggesting movie nights. It felt almost healing. But there were little things I noticed. Sarah started asking about my paperwork. "Have you updated your will?" "Mom?" she asked one evening over spaghetti. I brushed it off. Just curiosity. I told myself. She'd always been practical. Soon, she was handling my mail. "Don't worry. I've got it," she'd say, plucking envelopes from my hands. She began managing my appointments, too. "It's just easier this way." She'd smile. She even asked me, more than once, "What's the combination to the safe again?" Just in case. She said it with such innocence, such ease, that I never questioned it. I was tired. And if I'm being honest, I liked having them around. The company, the laughter, the illusion that life still made sense. I'd catch her sometimes, walking into rooms with a notepad, jotting things down. "Just making lists," she'd say. Grocery items, chores, bills. At least that's what I thought. Sarah wasn't cruel. Not openly. She was attentive, considerate. But over time, I noticed decisions were being made without me. She'd cancel a plumber without asking, rearrange the medicine cabinet, set up automatic payments from my account without mentioning it. I chalked it up to her trying to help, to her wanting control after the chaos of her divorce. I wanted to believe the best in her. I had to. She was my daughter. And Emma. Sweet Emma. She'd curl up next to me with her favorite blanket and read bedtime stories. She had no idea what currents were stirring just beneath our roof. She was the innocent thread keeping me tied to hope. Looking back now, I can see it all clearly. The questions about my will, the eagerness to streamline things, the quiet way she began taking over. But at the time, I thought love was returning to my home. I thought sharing my space again, sharing my life, was healing my broken heart. I had no idea Sarah was healing hers by planning to break mine. It was a Tuesday evening, just like any other. Sarah was in the kitchen, humming as she steeped chamomile in my favorite ceramic mug. The same gentle rhythm as every night before. Tea, music, soft words of care. It had become our little routine, a kind of ritual that made grief feel gentler. I'd had a dull ache behind my eyes all day. I walked into the kitchen to grab some aspirin, trying not to disturb her rhythm. I opened the drawer where I usually kept the bottle, but it jammed. Something was wedged at the back. When I pulled, the contents spilled out. Pens, pill organizers, a grocery list, and then a folder slid out and landed flat on the floor. I might have left it alone. I really might have. But the label was typed, bold and unmistakable. Estate Planning, Margaret Wilson. That's me. I hesitated. My hand hovered over the folder like it might burn me. But something deeper than fear took over. Something cold and steady. I picked it up, sat down at the kitchen table, and opened it. The first page was a power of attorney document. Not one I'd ever signed. Not in that format. Not with that signature. There were nursing home brochures tucked inside. One highlighted in yellow, Sunset Manor, $3,200 a month. I flipped to the back pages. There were bank statements, copies of deeds, account numbers, and then her handwriting. Slanted, tight, familiar. Mom getting more forgetful. Perfect timing. 1.5 millimeter taxes of 1.1 millimeters clear. Transfer assets by December. Move Mom January. My hands started shaking so hard I could barely hold the papers. I reached for the aspirin and missed. I just stared. There were notes on my prescriptions, with reminders to document memory issues. Another sheet with printed search results for early signs of dementia. Declaring parent legally incompetent. Signing over assets if elderly confused. I didn't cry. Not right then. My body knew before my mind did that this wasn't just a mistake. This was a plan. A carefully constructed, legally orchestrated plan. And it had my name on every page. Footsteps. I barely had time to slide the folder back into the drawer before Sarah appeared in the doorway, holding the mug in both hands like a gift. There you are. She smiled, setting the cup in front of me. I made it extra sweet tonight. Her eyes were calm, her voice almost musical. She had no idea what I'd just read. She thought I was still in the dark. You okay, Mom? She asked gently. I looked at her, and in that moment, I understood what betrayal felt like in the deepest part of your bones. But I didn't flinch, just looking for my reading glasses. Honey, I said, managing a tired smile. She relaxed. Her shoulders dropped. She took a sip of her own tea and started chatting about Emma's school project. I nodded, listened, even laughed at the right moments. That night, as she helped me into bed and pulled the blankets over my legs. I watched her closely. She smoothed my pillow, kissed my forehead, and turned off the lamp with practiced tenderness. I felt like I was already buried. The tea still lingered on my tongue, but it tasted like poison now. I stared at the ceiling for hours, blinking in the dark, wondering how long she'd been preparing this. How many evenings she'd poured kindness while plotting my erasure. But Sarah had made one crucial mistake. She underestimated what 30 years of marriage to a businessman had taught me about reading people and protecting myself. The morning after felt like waking up in someone else's life. The sunlight poured through the kitchen window as usual, and Sarah was already dressed and bustling about, her voice bright with fake cheer, running a few errands. "Mom," she said, kissing the top of my head. "Back by lunch. Don't forget your vitamins." And just like that, she was gone. The moment the door closed, I sat in stillness. The house had never felt so quiet, but the silence didn't scare me anymore. It cleared space for something else, something I hadn't felt in months. Focus. I reached for the old phone book in the drawer beneath the phone, one of the few things Sarah hadn't digitized or streamlined. My fingers hovered, then landed on a name I hadn't called in years. Tom. He and Robert had built the business together, before Tom retired to Florida. I didn't expect him to answer, but he did. "Margaret," he said, his voice hoarse with surprise. "It's been a long time. I didn't waste time." I told him the truth. Not all of it. Just enough. About the documents, the nursing home brochures, the feeling in my gut that kept me from sleeping. There was a pause. "Robert always said," Tom finally murmured, "you were the real strategist behind the business. He handled the deals. Sure. But it was your instinct that saved him more than once." I didn't respond, but my spine straightened a little after the call. I walked down the hall toward the guest room, Sarah's room, and opened the door. My heart was pounding, but I wasn't afraid. I knew where she kept her laptop. I knew where she stashed things she didn't want Emma to find. It took less than 10 minutes. There were emails with the law office, a message from her to the lawyer. Confirmed. Mom signing papers Friday. Another chain with a facility director. Deposit sent. Room 214 reserved. Please hold until January. And then a string of texts to her friend Jess, the one she always swore didn't gossip. Finally getting what I deserve. Dad always gave everything to his charities and brothers. This time, it's mine. I sat on the bed, stunned, not by the malice, but by how certain she was. Certain I wouldn't notice, wouldn't act, wouldn't fight back. That certainty would become my weapon. Later that afternoon, I went to the basement. I hadn't touched Robert's files since he passed, but they were still there. His briefcase, his binders, the folder labeled Contracts, Private, and tucked inside. My own handwriting from years ago. Notes I'd made about trusts, property law, and estate protections. I'd forgotten how much I knew. I'd been more than a wife. I'd been his business partner. Quietly, steadily. The one who read the fine print. The one who noticed when a decimal was out of place. The one who never signed anything without understanding every clause. I wasn't helpless. I'd just been resting. I called Henry next. Robert's attorney for 20 years, and a man who had always treated me with respect. I need to make some changes. I told him. And I need discretion. He didn't ask questions. He just said, "Come in tomorrow." That evening, I sat with Sarah and Emma at dinner like nothing had changed. I smiled, asked about school, praised the chicken. I even offered to wash the dishes. But behind my smile, I was working. I reviewed her calendar, saw the dentist appointment she'd scheduled for me on Friday, a cover for the signing. I noted how she watched me closely when I read the paper, as if looking for signs I couldn't follow the story. She needed me to appear weak. She needed me to cooperate. And that meant I still had the upper hand. I spent that night drafting my own plan. A real estate trust in my name. A sealed file transferring partial ownership of assets into a foundation Robert and I once dreamed of starting. A new will. One that protected Emma. And only Emma. If Sarah wanted a game, I'd give her one. But we wouldn't be playing checkers anymore. Have you ever had to outsmart someone who thought they were smarter than you? Comment 1 if you've ever had to fight back cleverly. Because what I did next surprised even me. Friday was only days away. But I no longer felt like a woman counting down to her own disappearance. I felt something else now. Control. Not anger, not vengeance. Just calm, deliberate clarity. The first step was gathering truth. While Sarah ran errands or took Emma to school, I began planting seeds of my own. I found one of Robert's old digital recorders, disguised it in a book on my nightstand, and synced it to my phone. I left it running when Sarah made her calls, especially the ones she took just outside the kitchen window, whispering into her phone with her back turned to me. Her voice was clear, confident, too confident. She's slipping. She told someone. I can get her to sign by Friday. She trusts me. I took photos of the forged documents late at night while Sarah and Emma were asleep. My hands steady now, no longer trembling like they did that first night. I created a hidden folder in my email and forwarded every image to Henry, my lawyer. Henry and I met again on Wednesday. He walked me through every possible angle: fraud, undue influence, financial elder abuse. But most importantly, he helped me do what Sarah never expected. I built a fortress. We transferred property titles into a trust under my name. We created a charitable foundation in Robert's honor, or something he'd always wanted but never had the time to finish. And we rewrote my will. Emma would be taken care of, without a single dollar going through Sarah's hands. But strategy alone wasn't enough. I needed Sarah to believe her plan was working. So I played the part she had cast me in. I started forgetting things. On purpose. I called the wrong day for my doctor's appointment. I asked her to remind me which pills were which. I even pretended to get lost in the backyard one evening and called her in a panic. Sarah ate it up. She began leaving documents around more openly, gently reminding me where to sign, offering to take care of the hard stuff. I smiled, thanked her, let her believe she was the puppet master. One evening, she held my hand and said, "Don't worry, Mom, everything will be taken care of soon." She said it like a promise. I said nothing. Behind the curtain, Henry and I built our case. We compiled the audio recordings, documented dates, times, phone calls. He prepared a sealed envelope with every detail: the fraud, the manipulation, the nursing home reservation, the financial motive. It was all there. Printed, signed, notarized. On Thursday night, Sarah reminded me of our meeting with the lawyer the next afternoon. I acted nervous. "Do I need to bring anything?" I asked. She smiled so sweetly. "No, Mom. Just yourself." That night, I couldn't sleep. But not from fear. I lay in bed thinking of Robert, of how proud he'd be. Not just because I was protecting what he left behind, but because I was finally remembering who I was before grief dulled the edges. This wasn't about punishing Sarah. It was about protecting what mattered. Emma, dignity, truth. Friday morning arrived. Sarah was humming in the kitchen, making my tea extra sweet. She had no idea I'd been making plans of my own. Friday at 2:00, we arrived separately. Sarah walked into the law office with her head high and her purse pressed confidently to her side, carrying what she thought were the final steps to securing her future. She'd dressed in a pale blouse and soft makeup, polished, concerned, motherly, a daughter doing the responsible thing for her aging parent. What she didn't expect was that I wouldn't be alone. When she saw Henry standing beside me in the waiting area, her smile faltered, but only for a moment. She recovered quickly, ever the actress, greeting him with polite confusion. "Oh, I wasn't expecting you here," she said, voice light. "I invited him." I replied, calm and steady. It felt appropriate. We followed her into the meeting room. Her lawyer, a young man with an eager face, stood to shake my hand. But the moment Henry introduced himself, the young man's demeanor shifted, shoulders tensing just slightly, eyes narrowing with awareness. As Sarah pulled out the forged documents, Henry placed a sealed envelope on the table. "What's this?" Sarah asked, her voice faltering again. Henry didn't answer. "I did. It's everything. I said, every call, every document, every lie. It's the trail you left behind." "Sarah," she blinked. "Mom, I don't know what you're talking about." Henry opened the envelope. He played the first recording, her voice clear, confident, undeniable. "She's slipping. I can get her to sign by Friday. She trusts me." Sarah went pale. Then he laid out the photos, copies of the power of attorney, her notes in the margins, the nursing home brochure with a check mark beside memory care. "Mom, what are you doing?" she whispered, her voice tight. I didn't flinch. "I'm protecting myself." The lawyer beside her began flipping through the pages, his jaw tightening. He stopped halfway through, then looked at Sarah. "Did you authorize any of this?" he asked her quietly. "She's confused," Sarah snapped. "She doesn't understand what she's saying. She's been forgetful lately. Just ask her." I leaned forward. According to Ohio Statute 1337.12, a power of attorney must be signed voluntarily and knowingly by a mentally competent individual. I'm competent, and I never signed that. Her lawyer sat back slowly. Sarah turned to me, desperate now. "You were supposed to help your family," she hissed. "This money? Dad left it for us, not to sit in a bank or go to charity." I took a breath. Even then, even with everything laid bare, part of me still wanted to soften, to find some version of her that I could hold on to. But all I saw was someone who thought manipulation was love. "You were my family," I said. "You still are." But this wasn't help. This was theft in slow motion. She looked away. "I raised you better than this," I added, voice steady. "But now I need to raise Emma better. She deserves better." I turned to the attorneys. "The estate has been reassigned into a charitable trust. Emma's education is fully funded. She'll never want for anything. But not a dollar will go through Sarah." Henry nodded. Sarah sat frozen, like the world had gone quiet around her. She got nothing. No access, no control, no leverage. But I wasn't done. Sarah thought losing the money was her punishment. She had no idea what real consequences looked like. Sarah thought the worst had already happened. She thought walking out of that law office empty-handed was the end of her story. But it wasn't. Not even close. The next morning, Henry and I met with the district attorney's office. I brought every piece of evidence, the audio files, the forged documents, the timeline. They didn't ask many questions. The facts spoke loud enough. What Sarah had done wasn't just immoral, it was illegal. Charges were filed. Elder abuse, forgery, attempted financial exploitation. When the DA's office contacted Sarah's attorney, he responded with just one sentence. "I'm withdrawing from representation." Even her legal counsel wanted no part of what she'd done. But this wasn't just about laws and courtrooms. This was about family and truth. I called a family meeting. Sarah's siblings flew in from out of state. They hadn't known much, just that I'd been quiet since Robert passed and that Sarah had moved in to help. But when I laid it all out, when I showed them the evidence, the betrayal, the plan to have me declared incompetent, They were stunned. Her brother, James, just shook his head. I never thought she'd go that far, her sister cried. They both agreed. Emma couldn't stay in Sarah's custody, not without review. We contacted a child advocate, and within days, a formal evaluation was in place. Not to punish Sarah, but to protect Emma. Always Emma. Sarah's world began to collapse piece by piece. The money she'd counted on, gone. The house she assumed she'd inherit, untouchable. And the debts she'd been hiding? They didn't go away just because her scheme did. It didn't take long for the rest to come to light. In one of the folders she hadn't deleted, I found access logs and online records, credit card balances, wire transfers. And then, what made everything click? Casino payments. Over $85,000 lost to online gambling. She hadn't just been desperate after her divorce. She was drowning in it long before. She had borrowed from people I didn't even want to imagine. She'd promised them money she didn't have, told them she had access soon. The nursing home wasn't a calculated power move. It was the panicked flailing of someone in deep, dangerous debt. And still, I wasn't interested in revenge. I had what I needed. My life. My name. My dignity. But I couldn't turn away from the daughter I once knew. The one who used to dance barefoot in the kitchen and fall asleep on my shoulder. So I gave her a choice. I told her, face to face, that I wouldn't pursue jail time if she agreed to treatment. Not for me. For herself. For Emma. She resisted, of course. Anger, denial, shame. But when I mentioned the files I'd uncovered, when I said the words, custody review and protecting Emma, something shifted. She broke. Completely. The tears came like a storm. Not performative, not strategic. Just raw and terrified. I didn't know how to fix it, she said. I thought this was the only way. It wasn't, I said gently. It never is. We found her an addiction counselor. Set up weekly check-ins. The DA agreed to defer prosecution on the condition she complete a rehabilitation program and stay clean of all financial entanglements. It wasn't forgiveness, but it was hope. And that's more than I ever thought I'd offer. What surprised me most wasn't the paperwork or the betrayal. It was how much strength I had left. How I could still hold boundaries and still feel love. That the two didn't cancel each other out. I thought the hardest part was over. But sometimes the most important victories happen quietly, away from lawyers and courtrooms. I used to think the end of a story came with silence. A slammed door, a lawyer's final word, a courtroom file closed. But recovery doesn't sound like silence. It sounds like the soft rhythm of new footsteps on old floors. Like laughter from the next room. Like your own breath when you finally realize you're no longer bracing for impact. Sarah entered treatment 2 weeks after our final conversation. It wasn't easy. I know that. But for once, she chose a path that didn't involve shortcuts or deception. And that choice mattered. Emma stayed with me during her mother's recovery. The house, our house, found a new kind of peace. We played cards in the evenings, baked muffins on Sundays, and started a small herb garden in the backyard. She asked questions, not the kind you can answer in one sentence, but the kind that deserve honesty. Why did Mommy lie? I didn't rush my response. Sometimes when people are hurting, they make choices out of fear. But that doesn't mean we stop loving them. It means we learn how to love them. From a safe distance. I wasn't just saying it for her. I was saying it for myself. I thought I'd lost so much after Robert died. My identity, my footing, my usefulness. But what I'd really lost was the belief that I could stand on my own. Turns out, I hadn't lost it. I just buried it beneath grief. Now, I was uncovering it again. I started volunteering twice a week at the senior center downtown, helping others fill out benefit forms, reviewing letters, reading fine print. It was strange how second nature it all felt. Like remembering a song you haven't sung in decades. A few months later, I joined a community book club. One evening, a man named Leonard offered me a ride home when the rain surprised us after a late meeting. He'd lost his wife years ago. We talked about gardening, jazz records, and the quiet ache of missing someone even after the world has moved on. I didn't need saving. Neither did he. We just enjoyed each other's company. Gently, respectfully. With Sarah, things moved slower. There were calls from the clinic, then letters. Then one day, her voice on the other end of the line, steadier than I remembered. "I'm sorry, Mom, for all of it. I didn't offer instant absolution, but I didn't hang up either. Forgiveness, I've learned, is not a gift you hand over. It's a boundary you build. I didn't give her access to my accounts. I didn't invite her back to live under my roof. But I listened. I made space for healing. For Emma's sake, we created new traditions. Sunday dinners with clear expectations. Birthdays without guilt. Conversations without raised voices. And always, the truth. I used to think loving your child meant saying yes, sacrificing, smoothing over. But love can also mean saying no, drawing the line, protecting your peace without apology. Sometimes the people who love us still hurt us. Sometimes self-protection is the most sacred act of love we can offer ourselves. And sometimes, the people who underestimate you give you the greatest gift, the reminder that your strength was never gone. It was simply waiting to be used. I sit in my garden now, watching Emma chase butterflies across the lawn. The sunlight catches her hair the same way it used to catch Sarah's when she was little. There's a sweetness in knowing the cycle hasn't been broken, but softened, redirected. My phone buzzes. Sarah, a quick update. Still in therapy. Still showing up. And I think maybe we all are. If you've ever had to choose between family loyalty and self-protection, you know how hard it is. Share your story in the comments. Sometimes we just need to hear that we're not alone. Tomorrow, I'll tell you about another family, another secret, another fight for truth and freedom. But for now, take a breath. And remember, standing up for yourself isn't the end of love. It's where real love begins.